world represented in all significant trading centres and all five continents.
Very good, Fergal. Now, there is a couple of people, if there's, I see that they're coming in through it there. So if it's okay, can I just see, can I add some of them in the stream? Hello, Damien? Damien, can you hear
Hello,
me?
Fergal. Yeah, I can hear you.
So, Damien, this is the Brexit that's on. So, can you throw to Fergal? Let me see. You texted in, so I'll just put one of them up here. So, there's it there. Would there be tariffs introduced for local business trading across the border? I assume that means.
For example, take the milk people, the farmers. But I have another couple of questions I sent there. So, basically, the tariffs would be a big factor, I think, Fergal.
Yeah, well, I think to be fair, just to clarify, I think your question is being made in the context of a hard Brexit. So I'm interpreting that to be, you mean Brexit on world trade tariffs, WTO terms. What that basically means is if for any company who isn't in the EU, yes, there would be tariffs, to put it bluntly. Those tariffs would vary depending on the nature of the product or the service. So that's when you hear people saying that a no-deal scenario would be a disaster, potentially, for the island of Ireland. I think it's important to clarify a few points, Cal, in the context of what you said earlier. And that's why we hear all this jargon about no deal, soft deal, exiting with a deal of some sort or whatever. And what was going on for just over the last 2 years was that the UK decided, following the referendum and following a vote of Parliament, that they would confirm to the European Union, European Commission, that they wished to exit the EU. The agreement then was that for a 2-year period, they would try and enter into what's called a withdrawal agreement, which would be the basis upon which the UK would exit, and then there'd be a further period, which would be the real negotiations upon on what basis the EU would exit in terms of more detail. But the key was that the withdrawal agreement was simply to set the framework of the parameters. Now, when Theresa May went with her withdrawal agreement, Theresa May subsequently, the last time she sought the extension, I think a number of people did not pick up at that time, but one of the EU agreements, my understanding is, I'm not a legal person, was that the EU required her to confirm that the UK were accepting the withdrawal agreement in terms of the basis upon which a withdrawal would take place. Theresa May subsequently has come back to our Parliament now on 3 occasions and has not been able to get that through. But the UK have agreed that the extension is on the basis of the withdrawal agreement that Theresa May has already submitted.
Right. So basically, Damien, are you ringing? You're from a laptop, or where are you? Is that a phone you're on?
Oh, sorry. I'm on a phone here, and I don't have Wi-Fi, so I'm off the grid here. So if anything happens here, Fergal, I could disappear. But
that's okay. Look, I've got.
So,
Damien, just 1 second. I'm just going to bring in another guy here, Kevin. How you doing, Kevin?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Are you good?
Good afternoon.
I am great. Marvelous. Fergal, how are you?
Not too bad, Kevin.
So, Kevin, have you got any question for Fergal regarding Brexit? Obviously, Fergal hasn't got a magic ball. He's only here on basis of accountancy and his knowledge of it, because there's a lot of confusion around Brexit. A lot of people don't know. They're talking now about another referendum. I hear people on there all the time talking about, the vote was already done. Why should we have a second referendum? The truth is the Parliament is divided, and people really don't know. So there is another question, Kevin, just before yours, that somebody had put in there, Fergal. I don't know why you can see it, but it's basically, surely all this is scaremongering, and both business and private individuals really have nothing to worry about. Is that true, or do they have something to worry about? What do you think, Fergal?
Well, I think, to be fair, if we agree with it, if we agree to conclude on what factually has happened, and then acknowledge that there is a lot of uncertainty, which is currently due to interpretation, but has not been factually implemented, and therefore the uncertainty is what's causing issues with business and investment. Because in any environment, no matter whether it's Brexit or anything else, when there is uncertainty, empirical evidence suggests that business in particular are reluctant to invest because of the uncertainty of the future of their investment. Now, what actually happened was, factually, was that in the referendum, a majority of people in the UK voted to leave the
Yeah.
EU. But the problem was, and still remains, that what did leave actually mean? So they voted to leave, yes, but they were not told what leave would be. So therefore, it is accurate for Theresa May to say that she was honouring the agreement with her proposed withdrawal agreement, because it was a Brexit. They were going to leave, but the terms upon which they were going to leave was her terms and not the terms as other people would like to leave. So the key point here is that the referendum said the UK would like to leave, but it didn't go on to specify on what basis the UK would like to leave. And that's where you're currently hearing.
Yeah.
all the
Okay. That's, I sort of accept that. But again, let me see here just for 1 second. If I could look at this. What did Cameron say back in the day of the time? Is it possible for me to perhaps show this? Let me just say, Fergal, if just see, can you?
I want to clarify this. I don't even have to hear.
Can we listen to this?
You have no
I know you can
other
come back to
agenda.
me in a
You
second.
repeated
Listen
that
to
here
this.
today. We all know you were talking about Boris Johnson. Will you at least admit that?
I have huge respect for Boris as a politician. He's a great friend of mine. He is a fantastic mayor of London. I think he's got a lot to give to the Conservative Party. I think he's got a lot to give to this country. But on this issue, I think he's got it wrong. And I think he's reached the wrong conclusion. So we're going to have, I hope, a very reasonable and civilized argument, both between us and between other parties. And you're going to find people with some fairly strange bedfellows. This is one where, Jeremy Corbyn and I agree. I mean, we don't agree about many things, but we agree about this one. So we just have to have a debate. And yes, of course, it's going to be a strong and a passionate debate. And I think he's got this one wrong. Some people are suggesting maybe if we vote no, we can have a second renegotiation. We can have a second referendum. And I think that is a complete illusion. This is a straight decision. You stay in or you get out. And I think it's misleading people if we pretend there's some other answer here. So I think Boris has got this wrong. I have huge respect for him. I think he's got a very strong future in British politics. But on this one, I think he's made the wrong decision.
So there you have it, Fergal. He's basically said back in the day that actually this was like a one-off decision. There was no real details on it. The government, as far as I know, spent out £9 million worth of information leaflets that stood outside the referendum authorities, and still the people voted to leave. So I understand what you're saying, that maybe the terms weren't there. But would it be fair enough to say, Fergal, that if there is another new referendum, it could actually cause more trouble than, could it not affect the economy? Like, do you know what I mean?
It could. Uncertainty is from the economy point of view. The key issue is uncertainty. But I don't think we should. There's two different issues there, Carl. I don't think we should confuse them. Yeah. Number one, whatever Fergal McCormick said or David Cameron said is their own prerogative. Yeah. The referendum was a simple vote in or out. However, at a later stage, it was always recognised that there would then have to be a process to facilitate this. What's currently happening is the argument is over the process. On the second point you make, which is the far more significant point from a business point of view, whether it be exchange rates, whether it be, unfortunately, political unrest in the past or whatever, where there is uncertainty, whatever is causing it, that has a detrimental effect on business, on trade, and employment opportunities. And that's why in most areas of the world where there is current uncertainty, however that is caused, basically they are not exceeding normal business environment conditions.
Okay, so Kevin, I'm sorry to keep you there. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Have you got a question for Fergal?
I have. Fergal, listening to the politicians at the moment, right? The politicians in the north of Ireland are talking about a three-tier election process now, whether it's vote to leave without a deal, vote to leave with a deal, or stay within the EU. Now, this is what they're bothering about at the moment, that, where you can transfer votes. Obviously, if you don't meet the target of votes, then you move to the second tier and then to the third tier. This is the talk what they're doing at the moment, because obviously way back when Brexit did happen, you know, they had an idea what they did want, but when it happened, they were all confused. Hence the reason why Boris jumped ship, because none of them had a clue what they wanted. They didn't even look at the implications of exactly what could happen. Or
Yeah, but
might
what is
happen.
your concerns, Kevin? So tell me now. Remember, Fergal's with a accountancy firm. So what is your concerns, or what is it? Like I've got one here that somebody's basically saying, should I close my Euro account? I'll find it here in a minute. But what is your concerns, Kevin? Say something.
My concern is right. If they left without a deal, in hindsight, right, there's no deal, or maybe the EU actually got bored and says they forced their hand and actually put them out.
Yeah.
Now, the implications of what is it? They're talking 60 to 70 billion pounds that England have to pay the EU. Surely that would cripple England with no deal. And the implications for ourselves here in the north. Okay, we talk about hard borders and soft borders. I can't see any other way out of it, because if the UK leave, then as we're part of that UK setup, then we also leave. So therefore, they have to protect the borders somehow.
Yeah.
And all this talk about the REC, this and there's 600 borders, I think, in the whole of this
Right.
island.
So, Kevin, just to sort of summarise, what you're saying is, if there effectively is a hard border in the north of Ireland, it's going to be affected. You're saying that the EU is going to have to protect its borders, and no matter what they're talking about, this special equipment and that. So, effectively, there's going to be tariffs. So, Fergal, do we have any idea? What would happen? I know, the customs union is where we all agree the same tariffs, and in the single market is we all have agreements and different trading agreements. What happens, Fergal, in the situation of hard Brexit and the EU have to implement a hard border? Do we end up? What happens for us going across the border?
Well, again, obviously, I'm commenting here from a business perspective.
Yeah.
What you got to remember, some of the things that were talked about did not include tariffs across the Irish border, because what was actually talked about, for example, in Theresa May's proposal, specifically excluded that. Because what happened there was that the UK and Europe agreed that in an interpretation which wouldn't be necessarily agreed unifiedly by everyone, that to protect the Good Friday Agreement, the European Union agreed, if Theresa May's proposal had gone through, it would have been that there would be no tariffs between a business in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and equally, there would be no tariffs internally in the UK between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. So what happened there was, if Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, this is where you had the backstop agreement, this way the backstop in there to ensure that any final arrangement, which is what the further negotiations will be about once the withdrawal agreement is signed, would enshrine a protection for Northern Ireland within that. Now, the unionist population felt that was potentially a dilution of the union.
Right.
That again is open to debate. However, the Good Friday Agreement, which was internationally signed by both the UK government, the Irish government, the EU, and an observatory signature, as I understand it, was the American government, said the people of Northern Ireland, not the people of the UK, and not the people of all the island of Ireland. If the people of Northern Ireland decided, by a majority of more than one, to either stay in the UK or to join the Republic of Ireland, that would be consented to by both the UK and Ireland. I think the EU is arguing, and this is a significant point, obviously with promptings from the Irish government, that for a straightforward, simple Brexit with no special criteria for Northern Ireland, actually the Good Friday Agreement could not be honoured. So the reason why you've had the whole backstop and the whole debate around backstop is that Theresa May, rightly or wrongly, agreed with that. And Theresa May and the UK government have come up, if you look at the withdrawal agreement, I think 60% of it or more is actually about purely Northern Ireland, the relationship with the Republic of Ireland. It actually was going out of its way to try and put in place a mechanism which would facilitate the UK leaving the EU, but that they would put in place a special arrangements, whatever you want to call it, which would not undermine the Good Friday Agreement and would allow for that vote to happen, if it ever happened at any stage in the future, without having a major impact on trade, because one way or the other, there was going to be no tariffs between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Theresa May then went stronger and got a concession from Europe that not only would that be Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, but that Northern Ireland businesses transferring goods or services within the UK to the rest of the UK would be on the same basis as they were travelling from Finchley to Edinburgh.
So now Boris Johnson.
The reason why I say all that is to come back to Kevin's point.
Yeah.
It's a significant point, which is, and there's nothing simple in this, is that a Brexit does not necessarily mean there will be tariffs between Northern Ireland and ROI. And the reason for that is because in the very withdrawal agreement that Theresa May signed on behalf of the UK government but couldn't get through the UK Parliament, it specifically, actually, even though it was Brexit, actually excluded tariffs between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland.
But
so
back in the day, Fergal, this is what was it Boris Johnson said, as far as I can do, if I can actually throw that up.
Cal, sorry, I'm sorry. I've got to say that, and this is the danger. Whether Boris Johnson said it, or Fergal McCormick said it, or Tom Jones said it, is really irrelevant. It's ultimately what the legal document, withdrawal agreement, signed by the UK and the European Union and endorsed by their parliaments, which will decide.
But surely if it's...
All the areas you're referring to at present is actually, and that's the problem from a business point of view, because the uncertainty feeling is subjective. Because actually, you can have a Brexit or not a Brexit that can vary. A Brexit can actually be in so many different ways, and it's still Brexit, but it could be Brexit with conditions. So the challenge here for business, very quickly, is that we need to remove this uncertainty, because this uncertainty is ultimately having effect on the businesses in our local area. And many businesses in our local area are having difficulty recruiting skilled talent. And many businesses in our local area are saying part of that reason is because people they previously had access to are afraid, even though there's no reason to believe at present that the UK will not facilitate European Union citizens who have the skill to do the job. But it's not the fact that matters. It's the perception that matters. And that perception then fuels uncertainty in people's minds. And literally, what that means is once you create uncertainty, you're creating a further challenge to business. And that's what we got to eliminate. So we all have a responsibility to try and come to a solution, whatever that solution is, which actually will allow us to plan. To be fair to Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, the Troubles was probably a far greater challenge. But we handled it, much as we didn't like it. But we knew it was going on, we had to allow for it. But the problem,
Fergal, no matter what you say, right?
The problem at present is, I must say this very strongly, the problem at present is nobody knows. Tragically, nobody knows as of today what is going to be the Brexit arrangement, if any.
We can only go but what we have. Boris Johnson is now leading the race to become the new Prime Minister, effectively. This is what Boris Johnson said at the time, if I can actually do it, and you can decide whether or not it's...
But sorry, Cal, I would like to know the relevance of that, because to be honest...
We'll just listen to it and see what you think then. Let me see.
So what's the relevance to what Boris Johnson said? Please explain that to me.
Well, the relevance, I believe, is that he's going to be the next Prime Minister and he's going to decide on what is happening. And what he's basically saying is that there's going to be no charge. Just listen.
No, sorry, Cal. I think before you play it, pause. We have to clear the issue here.
Yeah.
You've already seen factually that what Theresa May said couldn't happen. So literally, because of the constitutional laws of the UK and because of the ruling of the legal system, it has to be approved by Parliament. If the majority in Parliament agrees with what Boris Johnson says, yes. But the point I'm making is I think we're going over a lot of stuff here that's not solving any issues. The point is it has to be carried by Parliament. So the Prime Minister, he or she, no matter what they say, can't do it. And number two, there's another fundamental point, that unless the EU agree with them, it can only then be a straight Brexit with World Trade Organizations, because that means UK have taken a unilateral decision to leave. Or
Well, then going on that basis, Fergal, is it not then law that we're leaving on, is it October the 31st or something like that?
well, that is a fair interpretation. The only issue against that is that the current Parliament has voted and have indicated that if that was about to happen, they would immediately revoke the Article 50 and go back in. Because what they have said is, and this is why the uncertainty arises, not black and white, what they have said is, they haven't said what type of Brexit they want or no Brexit, but what they have said is they're not in favour of a no-deal Brexit. So literally,
right, with all them facts then, Fergal, so I said they're October the 31st we're leaving. You're saying the Parliament is going to basically block that.
No, I didn't say that.
No, you said they could.
I must not be misinterpreted. I said at present,
the
indications are on the present Parliament, that they are not in favour of a no-deal Brexit, which basically, to answer your question, I believe that based on evidence to date, there is nothing which suggests otherwise, that prior to the 31st of October, if that was the only option, Parliament would vote for a no deal, and that would mean you'd stay in the EU.
So Fergal, are you telling me that you believe that there'll be a second referendum or there'll be a general election?
Please don't.
What do you think?
To be fair, I'm not a politician.
No, I know. I just want your opinion.
You asked me that the challenge here for business is that we want certainty, and currently we're not getting any certainty. And the reason we're not getting any certainty is for the very points you're putting forward, is because actually the truth is nobody can tell you what's going to happen because of what I said to you there a few minutes ago. Until it's actually approved by Parliament and agreed by the EU, then the only thing that can happen is two options. Either we stay in Europe or we leave in World Trade Organizations. If alternatively a Brexit is agreed on specific terms, whatever those terms are, it can be different. And that's why the very point I'm saying to you is it doesn't matter what Boris Johnson says or what Jeremy Corbyn says.
Yeah.
It will require the approval of Parliament and wait for it, then the approval and agreement.
That's right.
Of the EU. If it doesn't do that, and this is where the 31st of October it becomes important, if it doesn't do that, the UK either crashes out of the EU on World Trade Organization tariffs on 31st of October, or Parliament puts a motion to Parliament which says the UK does not leave the EU, and if that happens, it means the UK then continues in the EU. And that is why, by the way, you're now trying to argue quickly a compromise to say, can we get a further extension to 31 October to see can we have time to come to an agreement?
Right, Fergal, just to get you in there quickly, there's a question in front of you there. So somebody is basically saying, under the basis that you've said, if a business therefore in Northern Ireland presently selling into Europe now could face a hard Brexit, should they be doing anything about that? Can they do anything now?
Yes, and the reason
what can they do?
The problem is I can't tell them exactly what will be the situation.
Of course.
So what they got to do is they got to basically look at various scenarios and try and dilute or minimize the risks of doing business post Brexit or non-Brexit. So what they do is they look at their suppliers to see can they minimize their dependence on one supplier. They look at their customers and see how they could do business, how they could service the customer different ways, because they have to try and keep all their options open. So it is not unusual, and we would see quite a few of our clients have been doing this type of scenario planning for some time. Now, it won't solve the problem, but what it will do is it will mean that they have at least identified issues that they're trying to resolve. So what you're seeing quite common at present is you're seeing, for example, businesses reducing their dependence on a supplier who is exclusively in Europe or an supplier who is exclusively out of Europe to see can they quietly reduce the risks at a future stage. You're seeing businesses explore potential strategic alliances, facilities. For example, if they're manufacturing or processing and their particular product. For example, let's take a sandwich business. Believe it or not, the WTO tariffs on particular elements of food ingredients that are in all of our common sandwiches means that given the net profit on sandwiches is certainly no higher than 10%, and the world tariff is suggesting I think 15 to 19%. And overnight, the business couldn't survive because actually the new cost of the tariff means it would wipe out their profits and they couldn't survive. So what's happening there is you are seeing businesses like that exploring the possibility of having a two-site location, either opening up premises north or south or acquiring businesses north and south, which gives them more flexibility. That's quite common at present, and that's been going on for the last couple of years. Now, what that's trying to do is that, because there's not certainty, that's trying to reduce the risks of any shocks on their business in the future. But that's what businesses do every day. That's what businesses are doing every day. But it's very hard to do it in the current environment when such a fundamental issue is creating uncertainty, because there is no, and this is the point I think we highlighted in the last 20 minutes, unfortunately, nobody can say with certainty what is actually going to happen.
Right. So there's another question there, which I don't know anybody can answer or not. What is it? If business or individuals from the UK jurisdiction has now a euro account, should they close it or keep it?
Give me some of it.
Well, again, the issue there is that there's no black and white answer to that. But they certainly should. They actually should do neither at this moment in time. There could be very good reasons, either before or after, that continue to be the same. That you have different currency bank accounts to facilitate hedging. That you don't want to actually incur the cost of transferring from one currency to another if you're doing both sales and purchasing in a particular currency. In some instances, it may make logic to operate a bank account in that currency.
It might be very hard after Brexit for Fergal to get a euro account. Would that not be a fair point?
Well, again, to be fair, that may not necessarily be the case.
No.
The truth of that is, you may not be able to get a euro account in the sterling area, but
Yeah.
there's nothing to prevent you in the future. It may require you having a director in that jurisdiction that you're opening the bank account in. But
Right, okay.
you
So,
know,
Karen, you and Damien here, do you want to throw anything else in there? Because I don't want to
Just
keep
one
Fergal
on-
too long.
On the educational part, right? See, if the UK leave without a deal, students that want to actually go to Ireland to study, they like to maybe go into the institutes in Dublin, not, will it affect their grants?
Well, the answer to that is yes, it could do, but it's not a black and white answer, because again, you have in the past could have arrangements between countries or legal blocks of countries transitional arrangements for students. But as of now, it certainly would affect the grants. However, the key point is, you may remember that the transfer of people between the UK and Ireland, the British and Irish governments did confirm that prior to the EU, they both of them joining, they were going back to honour that the movement of citizens. So I'm not a legal person. You'd have to look at the small print of that arrangement, because they did clarify a few months ago, if you remember, that they would not affect the rights of dual citizenship between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and the UK regions. And they also clarified that there would be free movement between Ireland and the UK of people, which they had prior to joining the EU. Now, that may well, and I'm not saying it will be, that may well allow a get out if there was a will and a way, potentially students, or it may not. For example,
Okay, Damien, I know, Damien, you're in Belfast there and you're on a mobile phone and your data, so it's sticking in all right. But, you know, I know you're using up your data. So have you anything else to ask, Fergal?
Well, just a simple question, Fergal, and thanks a million. You've answered a lot of questions there. I know businesses want clarity, that's for sure. The DUP tell us here in Belfast that this is good for Northern Ireland. Brexit is good for Britain. In your opinion, is it?
Well, you know, I've got to give you a personal opinion as opposed to opinion of and I respect diversity. I respect those people who say that Brexit is good for Northern Ireland. I haven't yet seen any evidence of that. The only evidence I've heard them say is, we can do this and the world's a big place, etc., etc. What I do know is that if Brexit happens, and I don't think there's any dispute about this, that in the short term, the disruption caused will definitely not be good for Northern Ireland or the island economy. And the issue then is whether you can demonstrate or trust there's empirical evidence, which is forecasting evidence, to suggest that in the long term it'll be beneficial. My personal view is that I cannot see any circumstance at present where Brexit would be good for Northern Ireland. However, I do respect that other people may not share that view, But if you get me straight into business, and that's why all the business organizations, not representing 100% of their members, because some people would vary, but the fact is they've all, as I understand it, surveyed their members on regular occasions, and each occasion the vast majority of those business organizations members are saying that's why they're in favour of staying within the EU, because of the adverse impacts that a Brexit will have. But nobody can say with a crystal ball that Brexit will either cause massive difference in the long term or the opposite. But all the facts are, without doubt, definitely in the short term. I've heard nobody, and I mean, I've heard no factual information which would suggest that in the short term Brexit will be beneficial for Northern Ireland. I do acknowledge that some people.
Damien, I hope that answered that for you, Damien. Look, Fergal, again, there's a question there.
Yep.
It's not basically, it's basically a political question if you want it, but and I don't know why it's up, because you're obviously here based on business and interest of business, but someone did say, leaving business aside for the moment, Rory, do you think Brexit would lead to the breakup of the Union, specifically United Ireland? You know, again, from a business point of view, you know, North Side, is that possible through a Brexit?
Well, I think, to be fair, the issue there basically is that's crystal ball gazing. I think the fact is that if such a fundamental constitutional impact happens on the UK, that may cause some unease within the UK itself, whether it be Scotland or whether it be Northern Ireland. But I think, to be fair, and this is a very important on the balance equally, you could argue a second referendum, one way or the other, could cause that. I think the ultimate and best outcome would be if a significant majority of the people living in the UK and indeed Northern Ireland could come to a compromise agreement, which actually would perhaps be of such a nature that the concerns that people might have re Brexit can be addressed in the compromise agreement and agreed with Europe. So you would legally have a Brexit, but because the Brexit would have so many restrictions to it, that most of the serious impacts of Brexit, as being envisaged now, would not happen. So therefore, I do believe that it is not good for the entire UK, whatever way it happens at present, that it is so divided down the middle on such a fundamental issue. And I think wise heads should try and come and resolve to give certainty and to say, look, whether we like it or not, the facts are there is nobody in favour of perhaps a massive, hard Brexit. Equally, those who want to stay in the EU have to accept there's a very significant amount of people who don't want to stay in the EU. And therefore, can we come to an agreement which meets most people's aspirations without achieving 100%? I think that's what Theresa May was trying to get to. Unfortunately, fundamentally, she didn't bring her party with her. And I think we're now in a dangerous position.
Thank you. So I have to thank Fergal for everything there today. Fergal from PKFFPM, helping us out on Brexit. Thank Damien and Kevin and other people like Bernie and Rory and the people who wrote in the questions. And, you know, obviously there's more questions coming back here. Fergal can't cover it. Maybe we'll do it again some other time. The question coming in, leaving business aside. I know I'm only giving the fact that Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to remain. Again, we'll have to go back and look at them things again. I want to thank Fergal, Kevin, Damien, everybody. You know, it's very interesting, you know, and
the best insight I ever got.
What did you say, Kevin? Sorry?
The best insight I ever got, because any businessman you hear on the TV, it's always about the politics. It's great to hear the ingredients of what Brexit is, what it actually means. So I do appreciate you. And this wouldn't be possible without this today now. And I'm delighted to tune into it.
Thanks very much. And thank you, Damien, too. Let me just go to this here now for 1 sec.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Kevin.
Huh?
Sure, I go eat on break thing.